I have outlived 3 of my own sons. I have watched empires that called themselves eternal get folded up and put away like old maps. And in all that time, do you know what finally made the galaxy afraid of a small, soft, short-lived species from a wet little world near the rim? A bowl of warm water. That is where it started, not with weapons, not with fleets, with a stranger nobody would look at and one person who looked anyway. Let me tell it the way it happened, slowly, the way you tell a thing that mattered. But you have to understand what kind of place Pelham Drift was, or none of the rest of it makes sense. It was a fuel station. That is all. A bent old ring of metal bolted to a dead moon, and the moon itself wasn't even a real moon, just a captured rock that some long-gone mining outfit had hollowed and abandoned. The station turned slow around it, lights flickering on one side, dark on the other, like something half asleep that never quite woke up. It sat at a crossroads that used to matter and didn't anymore. 3 old jump planes met there. Once, that meant traffic, money, noise. But the lanes had silted up the way lanes do when the powers that own them stop caring, and by the time my story begins, a ship might come through Pelham Drift once a day, sometimes once a week. So you can imagine, a place like that far from everything, run by almost nobody. It was run, in fact, by 2 people, a woman and her brother. Her name was Mara Kessler. His name was Tomas. They were human, and at the time I did not even know what a human was. To me, they were just 2 of the small, warm-blooded creatures from the Rim world, the ones the rest of us thought of, if we thought of them at all, as a curiosity. A young species, loud, fragile, generous in a way that everyone agreed was charming and stupid. I will get to the stupid part, and I will get to who turned out to be the fool. Mara was the older of the 2. She kept the station's ledgers and its reactor and its temper. She had hands that were always a little burned from the work, and a way of looking at a broken thing that made you think she was already arguing with it in her head. She did not smile easily. When she did, you felt you had earned something. Tomas was younger, softer, the kind of person who talked to the machines while he fixed them. He sang, badly. He fed the strays, and a place like Pelham Drift collects strays, small scavenger creatures that ride in on freighters and never leave. He named every one of them. Mara pretended this annoyed her. It did not. They were poor. I want to be honest about that, because later people would tell the story as though the humans were great and rich and powerful, and that is a lie that misses the whole point. They were poor. The station was failing. Every month was a fight to keep the lights on and the air clean and the debt collectors patient. And there were debt collectors. But I should tell you about the tithe now, because they are part of all of this, and because you should understand exactly what kind of thing humanity stood up to. In your tongue you would call them the Skarn tithe. The Skarn were a hauling and protection combine that had spread across the whole rim over a few hundred standard years. They did not conquer worlds the old way with armies. They were smarter and worse. They bought the lanes. They owned the jump points, the relays, the refueling rights. And once they owned the roads, they owned everyone who needed to travel them. You paid the tithe. Everyone paid the tithe. You paid it to fuel your ship, to dock, to breathe their recycled air, to be allowed to keep doing the thing you had been doing for free a generation before. And if you fell behind, the tithe did not argue with you. It simply took cargo, ships, sometimes people, to work the debt off in places nobody came back from. They were not monsters in the way children imagine monsters. That is what made them so good at it. A Skarn collector would shake your hand. He would call you friend. He would tell you, sadly, that rules were rules, and then he would take your son to settle an account, and he would feel that he had been more than fair about it. Pelham Drift was behind on its tithe. Of course it was. A failing station at a dead crossroads, 2 poor humans keeping it alive on stubbornness. Of course it was behind. That was the situation. A small candle of a place, almost out of money, almost out of time, with the collectors already circling. That was where the stranger came. I was the stranger. I will not pretend otherwise, though for most of this story the humans did not know it, and I let them not know it. I came to Pelham Drift the way old, ruined things come anywhere, quietly, and looking like nothing worth a second glance. My ship was dying. That was real. I had been a long time on the move, longer than I will explain here, and the vessel that carried me had finally reached the end of itself. Its drive was a cooling ember. Its hull wept atmosphere from 100 small wounds. I had been drifting on the lane's slow current for 11 days, and Pelham Drift was the first light I had seen in all that time. I want you to picture how I looked when I came through their airlock, because this matters. I was old. My kind ages in a way that is not pretty. The body draws in on itself, the long limbs fold, the skin goes the gray of cold ash. My traveling shroud was burned and stained. I had no cargo, no credit chits, no escort, no faction marks. By every signal the galaxy uses to measure a being's worth, I read as worthless, a beggar, a husk that had wandered too far from wherever it should have died. That is exactly what I wanted to read as, but I will be honest with you, by the time I reached Pelham Drift, it was not entirely a disguise anymore. I was genuinely close to the end. I had been alone a very long time. I was tired in a way that has no translation. There were others docked there when I arrived. A Voral freighter crew, big armored haulers with their breathing tanks, a pair of Scarn-licensed traders, a clutch of those small scavenger pilots who follow the dead lanes looking for salvage. Every single one of them looked at me and then looked away. I want to dwell on that because it is the part people forget. It was not just the tithe that failed the test that day. It was everyone. The Voral turned their backs. The traders muttered something about quarantine and moved off. The scavengers laughed, the high clicking laugh of their kind, and one of them threw a ration husk at me, the way you would shoo an animal. That is how the galaxy treated the old gray thing that limped into Pelham Drift, with contempt when it bothered with me at all. And the galaxy was not wrong to expect that I was nothing. By every law of probability, I should have been nothing. I made my way across the docking ring. The lights flickered. The air smelled of hot metal and the sweet rot of a recycler that needed servicing. I was looking for a quiet corner to fail in, if I am honest, somewhere out of the way. And then a human knelt down in front of me. It was Mara. She had come out to log the new arrival, that was all. A dead ship drifting in is an event at a place like Pelham Drift. She'd have to file it, decide whether to tow it, whether it was a hazard. Routine. She came out with her scanner in her hand and her brother trailing behind her, and she found me slumped against the bulkhead where I had stopped because I could not make my legs go further. She did not look away. I remember the exact moment because I had been looked away from so many times by then that the not looking away struck me like a blow. She crouched down so her eyes were level with mine. She set the scanner aside, and she did the strangest thing. She frowned at me, not in disgust, in worry. "Hey," she said. "Hey, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" I did not answer. My translator was nearly dead like the rest of me. I think I made some small sound. She turned to her brother. "Tomas, he's freezing. No, don't touch the shroud, just get the heat lamp from the bay. And the warm water unit, the medical one, not the galley one." "Mara," Tomas said quietly, "the Scarn collector's due in 2 days. We don't have credit to spare on." "I'm not spending credit," she said. "I'm getting him warm, go." He went. Now here is a thing you should know about the Rim Worlders, about humans. They are warm-blooded in more ways than one. Their bodies run hot and so, it seems, do their hearts, and they cannot always tell the two apart. Where my kind would have run a cold calculation. What is this thing? What does it cost me? What does it offer? Mara Kessler ran a different sum entirely. She saw a cold, hurt, old creature on her deck, and the answer to her was obvious and required no thought at all. Get him warm. That was the first small favor. It was nothing. It cost her almost nothing. A heat lamp she already owned. Water she could spare. 10 minutes of her time at the end of a long day when she had a failing station and a debt and a brother to worry about. But I had been looked away from by the whole turning galaxy that day. And one small, poor, tired human knelt down on a flickering deck and decided I was worth getting warm. They moved me to the inner ring, to a maintenance alcove that was warmer than the dock. Tomas rigged the heat lamp over me. Mara brought the warm water unit, and when I could not work my own limbs well enough to use it, she held it to me herself. I want to describe that bowl of water to you, because it is the thing this whole story turns on, and I have thought about it for a very long time since. It was not special. It was a dented metal medical basin, the kind every cheap station has 100 of. The water in it was warm, not hot. She was careful about that. She did not know my biology and would not risk burning me. She had added something to it, a mild cleansing agent, because she could see the wounds in my hide under the shroud and she did not want them to fester. She cleaned them, with her own burned hands. An old gray stranger from nowhere, that the rest of the galaxy had thrown a ration husk at, and Mara Kessler sat on the cold deck and cleaned my wounds with warm water and did not once act as though I were anything other than a person worth the trouble. Tomas, meanwhile, had taken one look at my dying ship through the dock window and gotten quiet in a different way. He came back and crouched by his sister. Mara, his ship's gone, I mean really gone. The drive core's cracked. He didn't fly in here, he washed in. Another few days drifting and he didn't finish. Then he's not going anywhere for a while, Mara said simply, as though that settled it. We can't fix his core, we don't have the parts, we barely have parts for our own reactor. He paused. We have the one, the spare we were going to sell. I understood enough even then, even half dead, to know what that meant. They had a part, a rare one. The kind of thing that, at a dead lane station scraping for every chit, was not a tool, it was money. It was the difference between making the tithe payment and not. It was their margin, their cushion. The one thing standing between them and the collector taking something they could not afford to lose. And Tomas had just named it out loud, looking at my broken ship. Mara was quiet for a long moment. I watched her do the sum, the real one. I watched her weigh the part they needed against the stranger who needed it more. How far would it get him? She asked. Far, far enough to reach a real port, somewhere he could get proper repairs, proper help. Tomas rubbed the back of his neck. But Mara, the tithe. I know what the tithe is, Tomas. Her voice was tired. I know exactly what it is. She looked at me then. I was barely conscious. I could not have spoken if my life depended on it, and in a sense it did. I could not promise her anything. I could not pay her. I could not even tell her thank you. By every measure she could see, helping me was pure loss. There was no version of the math where it came out in her favor. She helped me anyway. Get the part, she said. But I did not deserve it. I want to be clear about that. They did not help me because I was good or wise or because they sensed I was secretly important. They helped me because I was cold and hurt and in front of them, and that was reason enough. That is the whole thing. That is the seed of everything that came after. The galaxy would spend years trying to understand what humans were, what made them different, why the great powers eventually learned to speak their name carefully. And the answer was always sitting right there on the cold deck of Pelham Drift, in a dented basin of warm water. They worked through their sleep cycle. I drifted in and out. I have fragments, Tomas's voice as he sang to himself, badly, working in my ship's gutted drive bay. Mara arguing with the reactor controls, trying to find the power margin to run a repair that big without browning out the whole station. The two of them passing tools back and forth, the easy shorthand of people who have done hard things together for a long time. At one point I surfaced enough to hear them talking, low, thinking I could not understand. If we give him the part we miss the payment, Tomas said, not a complaint, just laying it down. We were going to miss it anyway, Mara said. Half a payment, full payment, the Skarn don't care, we're short either way. They'll take something. Then they take something. A long pause. I'm not going to let them turn me into the kind of person who lets an old man die on my floor to save a payment I can't make anyway. That's the one thing they don't get to have. That part of me. I'd rather give them the cargo bay than that. Tomas didn't answer for a while, then softly, yeah. I have repeated those words to myself across more years than that woman lived. I'm not going to let them turn me into that. She did not know I could hear. She was not performing virtue for an audience. She was just deciding, alone with her brother in the dark, who she was going to be when it cost her. That is the kind of thing that, where I come from, we used to believe had gone out of the universe entirely. By the time I was strong enough to sit up on my own, my ship had a heart again. It was their part, fitted by their hands, powered up on a margin they could barely spare. Tomas had even patched the worst of the hull wounds with sealant meant for the station's own breaches. Mara had refilled my reserves from their tanks, fuel they could have sold, fuel the tithe would have valued, given away to a stranger who had not asked. I remember standing in the dock, on legs that worked again, looking at the small repaired vessel that would carry me out, and feeling something I had not felt in a span of time I will not embarrass myself by nomming. I felt like a person again, not a husk, not a thing to be shooed off a deck. A person, because two poor humans at the edge of nowhere had decided I was one. I tried to thank them. My translator was working again by then, charged off their power. I tried to find words. Mara waved it off, actually waved her burned hand like brushing away smoke. Don't, she said, you'd have done the same. I had not, in fact, always done the same. I had lived long enough and seen enough that I am not sure that was ever fully true of me, but she said it like a fact about the universe, like gravity. You'd have done the same. As though kindness were simply the floor that all thinking beings stood on, and she could not imagine it otherwise. You are in danger, I told her. I could see the shape of it, the tithe, the missed payment, the collector due. I had been around long enough to read the signs. The ones who own these lanes, they are coming for what you owe. She gave me a tired half-smile, the rare kind, the kind you earned. Yeah, they are. That's not your problem, friend. You just get yourself somewhere safe. I should have told her then, I should have said, do you know what you have done? Do you know what you have spent your last margin on? Do you know what I am? But the truth is, I did not entirely believe it would matter. I had been alone and small for so long that I had half forgotten my own weight. I thought of myself in that moment as exactly what I appeared to be, an old gray traveler being shown a mercy he could never repay. I thought the kindness would simply vanish into the dark the way all small kindnesses vanish, unremembered, unreturned. I was wrong about that. I was wrong in a way that would eventually rearrange the map of inhabited space. But I did not know it yet, so I only said, "What is your name?" "Mara Kessler, that's my brother Tomas." "Mara Kessler," I repeated. "I am very old and I have a long memory and I do not let things go. I set the name down in the part of me that does not forget. I will remember it." She laughed a little, thinking I was being sweet, an old man making a small promise that meant nothing. "You take care of yourself," she said, "and next time you wash up somewhere half dead, pick a station with better coffee." I left Pelham Drift 2 days before the collector came. I want you to sit with that timing because the universe is sometimes cruel about its arithmetic. 2 days. If I had been slower to heal, if I had lingered, I would have been there to see it. I was not. I flew out on the heart they had given me, into the dark, toward the deep places where things like me go to be alone. And while I flew, the Scarn tithe came to Pelham Drift to collect a debt. I did not see what happened next. Mara told me some of it later, what was left of it to tell. The rest I learned the way I learn everything, slowly, completely, from many sources. Because I am patient and I am thorough, and once I decide to understand a thing, I do not stop. I learned what they did to that little station at the dead crossroads. I learned what they did to the woman who knelt down for a stranger, and to the brother who sang to the machines. And somewhere out in the dark, alone in a ship that beat with a human heart, the old gray thing that the galaxy had thrown a ration husk at began, very quietly, to remember what it was. I told you the galaxy learned to fear a small, soft species near the rim. I told you it started with a bowl of warm water. What I have not told you yet is the second half of that sentence, the part the Skarn tithe never read in time. A favor done to a human is a small thing. A favor done to a human and then betrayed, that is something else entirely. That is a debt, and there was one being left in all the turning dark who still collected those. They had 2 days of peace left at Pelham Drift. Mara was right about the tithe. They did not care about half payments. They came for what they were owed, and when a station cannot pay in credit, the tithe has always been willing to take payment in other things. I will tell you what they took. But not yet. Some debts you have to walk all the way up to. You have to see exactly what was spent before you understand what was owed. So remember her before the next part. Mara Kessler, with her burned hands and her rare hard-won smile, who would not let the galaxy turn her into the kind of person who watched an old man die to save a payment she couldn't make anyway. Remember that she gave away her last margin to a stranger who could not pay her back. Because the stranger remembered everything. And the stranger was about to find out exactly how much the galaxy still owed. I was 4 days out from Pelham Drift when the tithe came to collect. 4 days and a great deal of empty dark between us. I felt nothing. There was no tremor in the universe to warn me. That is the thing nobody tells you about the worst moments of your life. They happen somewhere else, while you are doing something ordinary and the dark does not bother to send word. I was sleeping when it happened. The first sleep I had truly trusted in a long time, in a ship that beat with a heart 2 strangers had given me. I slept like something that had finally been allowed to put its burden down. Mara did not sleep that night. She told me later. She did not sleep because she knew they were coming, and she had spent the last of everything she had on me, and there was nothing left to pay them with. So she sat up in the control ring of her little station, with her brother, and they waited for the collector the way you wait for weather you cannot stop. The Skarn ship that came was not large. That is something people get wrong when they tell this story. They imagine a war fleet, banners, the whole apparatus of conquest. It was not like that. The tithe did not need fleets for a place like Pelham Drift. It needed one mid-sized cutter and a collector with the right paperwork. His name, the collector, was Vassan. I learned it later the way I learned everything later. He was an old hand at his trade, polished. He had collected from 1,000 failing stations, and he had a manner about it that the Skarn prized, gentle, regretful, utterly without mercy underneath. He did not enjoy cruelty. That would have been easier to forgive. He simply did not weigh it. To Vassan, a debt was a debt, and a being who could not pay was a kind of accounting problem to be resolved by whatever means the ledger allowed. He docked. He came aboard with 2 enforcers and a clerk. He shook Mara's hand. He called her friend. "Kessler," he said warmly. "Mara, good to see you. You're looking tired, friend. Running this place alone, it wears on a person. We've talked about that." "Vassan," she said. "I'll get right to it because I respect your time." He smiled. He had a smile he used for this. "The account. You're 3 cycles short now. I've been patient. The Combine has been patient, more than patient. I'd say I've stuck my own neck out for you, telling them you're good for it. And here we are again." He spread his hands. "So, what do we have?" She told him the truth. She had nothing. The station barely cleared its own costs. There was no margin. There had been one margin, one spare part, the rare component she'd been saving, and— "Where is it?" Vassan asked, still gentle. "The component, my clerk has it logged. You acquired it 8 cycles back. That would have covered most of what's owed. Where is it, Mara?" And here is the moment. Here is where it all turned, though none of them knew it. Mara could have lied. She could have said it failed, it was lost, it was stolen. The clerk could not prove otherwise. A lie might have bought her time. She did not lie. I gave it away, she said. Vassin blinked. You gave it away. There was a traveler. His ship was dying. He'd have died with it. I used the part to fix his drive and sent him on. The collector was quiet for a moment. I think, in his long career, no one had ever said that to him before. He had heard every lie. He had never heard the truth land quite like that. You gave away the one thing that could settle your account, he said slowly, to a stranger who could not pay you. Yes. Why? And Mara Kessler, with her burned hands and her empty ledger and the collector standing in her station, said the thing that I would carry like a coal in my chest for years afterward. Because he was a person, she said, and he was dying and I could do something about it. Vassin did not understand her. I want to be fair to him in the way that he was never fair to anyone. He was not built to understand her. To his kind, to the whole logic of the tithe, what she had done was not virtue. It was negligence. It was a being throwing away an asset out of some malfunction of judgment. He looked at Mara the way you would look at a machine that had broken in a way you'd never seen before, with a kind of clinical, irritated curiosity. That's a problem, he said finally. You understand that's a problem. The Combine doesn't recognize charity as a line item, Mara. The debt doesn't care who you fed. I know. I've defended you. Now I look like a fool to my superiors. You see how that's a problem for me too. I'm sorry it's hard for you, she said, and there was something flinty in it now, the tiredness sharpening into something else. But I'm not sorry I did it. That was when it stopped being gentle. I will not dwell on every detail of what the tithe did to Pelham Drift, because some things should be told and some things should only be acknowledged. But you must know enough to understand what was owed, so I will tell you the shape of it. They stripped the station. Not all at once. Vassin was methodical even in this. They took the cargo first, what little there was, then the equipment that could be sold. Then they began on the systems themselves, pulling out anything that had value, leaving the station gutted, half its lights dead, its air growing stale as the recyclers were carried out through the airlock. And when the cargo and the equipment did not cover the debt, because of course it didn't, a poor station has no hidden gold, the tithe took the only asset of real value left in that place. They took Tomas. This is the part Mara could barely tell me when the time came, so I will tell it plainly and quickly, the way she finally managed to. A debt the tithe cannot collect in goods, it collects in labor. There are places the Combine runs, they call them work settlements, which is a soft word for what they are. You go to one to work off a debt, and the debt is calculated in a way that makes sure you never quite work it off. People go in. They do not, as a rule, come out. Vassin's clerk did the arithmetic with a calm I am told was the worst part of all. One healthy adult human, sound of body, against the outstanding balance of the Pelham Drift account. The numbers were entered. The transfer was authorized. It was all very correct. Tomas did not fight because fighting would have meant the enforcers, and the enforcers would have hurt Mara, and they both knew it. So he did the bravest thing, which is also the quietest thing and which almost no one ever sings about. He went along with it. To protect his sister, he let them take him without a struggle. He hugged her at the airlock. He was crying but trying not to, the way young creatures do. And Mara, I cannot improve on what she told me, he said, so I will give it to you as she gave it to me. He held on to her and he said, don't you dare turn into them over this. You hear me? Don't let them make you sorry you helped that old man. That's the one thing we don't let them have. The same words she had said to him, in the dark days before. He gave them back to her at the worst moment of both their lives. Don't let them turn you into that. Then the airlock closed, and the Scarn cutter undocked, and Mara Kessler was alone on a gutted, dying station at a dead crossroads at the edge of nowhere. With her brother gone into the dark and no power left in the universe she knew to do anything about it. That is what the small favor cost. I want you to hold that and hold it honestly before we go on. Because the easy version of this story is that kindness is always rewarded, that good people are protected, that the universe keeps a fair ledger. That is a child's story. The truth is that Mara's kindness was punished. It was punished precisely because it was kindness, because she would not lie, because she had given away the thing that could have saved her, because she was the kind of person who knelt down for a stranger. The tithe took her brother for the crime of her decency. The universe did not protect her. The universe took everything from her. And then, and only then, because this is how it truly went, something in the universe that had been sleeping for a very long time opened its eyes. Let me tell you who I am now. It is time. I had let Mara believe I was a beggar because, in the moment, it was nearly true, and because beings like me have learned over long ages that it is safer to travel as nothing. The galaxy does not throw ration husks at the powerful. It does worse. So we go gray and bent and small, those of us who are left, and we move through the dark unnoticed, and that is how we have survived when so much else has not. My people, you would have no name for us because we made very sure of that. In the elder days when the lanes were young, there were compacts, agreements between the great old powers about how the galaxy would be ordered. Most of those powers are gone now. They overreached, or they fought each other, or they simply aged out of the universe the way everything does. But the compacts did not all die with them. Some were bound to something more durable than any single empire. They were bound to witnesses. That is what my kind became at the end of our age. Not rulers, witnesses, keepers of the old debts and the old laws, scattered thin across the dark, each of us carrying the authority to invoke things that the modern powers had forgotten were even still enforceable. We did not rule because we did not need to. We held the deeper machinery. We held the parts of the old order that even the Skarn tithe in all its arrogance was still, though it had no idea, quietly subject to. I was one of the last of these, perhaps the last. I had grown so old and so tired that I had nearly forgotten my own weight, as I told you. I had spent so long being nothing that I had half become it. And then a human knelt down on a cold deck and cleaned my wounds with warm water, and gave away her last margin to a stranger who could not pay, and asked nothing. Do you understand what she had done under the old law, under the compacts that the galaxy had forgotten but that I still carried? She had extended an unprompted mercy to a keeper of the deep order, freely, without knowing what I was, without hope of return. In the old reckoning, the oldest reckoning there is, that is the highest form of credit a being can offer the universe. It is not a transaction. It is not even a kindness exactly. It is a kind of grace, and grace was the one currency the old powers held above all others, because it was the one thing that could not be bought, faked, or taken by force. She had given grace to a witness. And the witness had said, I will remember it. I had set her name down in the part of me that does not forget. I had said it as an old man's small promise, half meaning it. I had not understood in that moment that I was not making a promise. I was opening an account. An old, deep, dangerous account, in a ledger the Skarn tithe had never read and would not have believed existed. I learned what had happened at Pelham Drift slowly, as I always learned things. I had reached out in my quiet way to look back at the little station that had saved me, only to make sure it had survived its collector. That was all. I expected to find Mara still there, scraping by, alive. I found a gutted ring of metal going dark around a dead moon. I found a station bleeding air. And I found Mara Kessler, alone in the failing dark, sitting in the control ring where her brother used to sing to the machines, with her burned hands open and empty in her lap, having lost everything for the crime of helping me. I came back. It took me time. The dark is wide, but I turned my ship, the ship she had given a heart, and I came back to Pelham Drift, and I docked at the half-dead station, and I walked through the airlock she had once carried me through, on legs that worked now because of her. She did not recognize me at first. I was no longer dying. I stood straighter than she had ever seen me stand. And I had stopped, somewhere in the journey back, pretending to be small. "It's you," she said finally when she did know me. Her voice was hollow. The fight had gone out of it. "The traveler, you came back." A terrible, broken, almost laugh. "You shouldn't have. There's nothing here. They took everything. They took—" She could not say it. "I know what they took," I said. "I know exactly what they took and why and who they are and where they have taken him." Something in my voice must have been different, because she looked up at me sharply. And for the first time since the cold deck, she really looked at me, the way she had looked at me when I was dying, except now she was the one who was ruined and I was the one standing whole. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Really, who are you?" And I told her. Not all of it. There was not time, and some of it has no words she could have held, but I told her enough. I told her what I was, and what the compacts were, and what she had done when she gave away her last margin to a stranger on a cold deck. I watched her try to take it in, that the old beggar she had pitied was something the Scarn Tithe, in all their power over the lanes, were like insects beneath. That her small mercy had not vanished into the dark unremembered after all. That it had landed, of all the places in the turning galaxy, on the one being still alive who could and would and now must answer it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said the thing that told me everything about why she, of all beings, had been the one to find me. She did not say, "Then save me." She did not say, "Then make them pay or restore my station or give me back what I lost." She said, "Can you get my brother back?" That was all, after everything. Not vengeance, not even justice, just her brother, the one warm thing left in her ruined world. I told her the truth, because she had earned the truth. "I can," I said, "and I will. But understand what you are asking, Mara Kessler, because I want it to be your choice and not mine. The ones who took him, they are not a man and a cutter. They are a combine. They own the lanes. To reach into one of their settlements and take back what they have entered in their ledger, I cannot simply ask. The tithe does not return what it has taken. They have never once in all their history given a debtor back." "Then how?" "By invoking something they have forgotten. There is an old law, older than their combine, older than the lanes they bought. It is still binding on them, though they do not know it, because it is bound to me and the few like me, and we did not die when the empires that made it died." I looked at her. "A grace freely given to a keeper creates a debt upon the whole order. That debt I am permitted to collect by any means the old reckoning allows. And the old reckoning, Mara, allows a great deal. More than the galaxy has seen in a very long time. More than I have invoked in longer than your species has existed." She did not fully understand. How could she? But she understood the shape of it. She understood that the gray old traveler she had pitied was about to do something to the Scarn Tithe that the Scarn Tithe could not imagine, did not deserve to survive, and had earned with absolute precision the moment they decided her decency was an accounting error and took her brother to balance it. "I don't want," she started. I don't want a war. I don't want people dead because of me. The ones at the bottom of that combine, the workers, the ones who didn't choose any of this, I won't have that on me." And there it was again, even now, even ruined, still drawing the line around what she would and would not let the universe make her into. I confess that her saying that, at that moment, with her brother gone, with every reason to want the whole rotten thing burned to ash, is the moment I stopped being tired. The moment the old weight I had set down for so long came back into me. And I welcomed it. "No," I agreed. "No war, no innocence. The old reckoning is not a blunt thing, Mara. It is exact. That is what makes it terrible. I will not touch one being who did not choose this. But the ones who did choose it," I felt the words settle into me like a sentence being passed. "The ones who built this, who run it, who took your brother and called it correct, they have been collecting from the helpless for 300 years on the assumption that no one above them was watching." I looked out the station window, toward the dark where the scarn lanes ran, where a combine that owned the roads believed it owned everything that traveled them. "They were wrong," I said. "Someone was watching. Someone has been watching the whole time, and the account is due." She was crying now, quietly, the way her brother had. I think it was relief and grief and fear all at once, too much for one body. I did the only thing I knew to do. I knelt down in front of her, the way she had once knelt down in front of me, so my eyes were level with hers. "You gave warm water to a dying stranger," I said gently, "and asked for nothing. So now I am going to give you something, and you do not have to ask. I am going to bring your brother home, and I am going to make very certain that no one ever again takes a person to balance a ledger on the assumption that the small and the kind have no one in this universe who will answer for them." What I did next, the galaxy still does not have one name for. The Scarn called it the Reckoning, when there were enough of them left to call it anything. Others called it the Collection. On the Rim worlds, on the human worlds where they tell this story to their young, they call it something simpler. They call it the day the favor came due. I left Pelham Drift again, but not into hiding this time. I went out into the dark to wake things that had been sleeping since before the lanes were drawn, to invoke compacts the modern powers thought were dead myth, to call in, across the whole spread of inhabited space, every old debt, every dormant law, every forgotten enforcement that the keepers had carried in silence, while the galaxy assumed no one was minding the deep order. The Scarn tithe had a cutter and a collector, and 300 years of impunity. I had a debt freely incurred under the oldest law there is, the authority to collect it by any means the reckoning allowed, and a very, very long memory. And I had a name set down in the part of me that does not forget, Mara Kessler, who knelt for a stranger, whose brother was about to come home. In the next part, I will tell you what Galactic-Scale Retribution actually looks like when it is carried out with restraint, which, I promise you, is far more frightening than when it is carried out with rage. I will tell you what happened to Vassain, and to the combine that thought it owned the roads, and to a work settlement where people went in and did not come out. And I will tell you what humanity became, in the eyes of the galaxy, on the day the dark finally answered for a bowl of warm water. But first, hold this before the next part. The tithe's whole power rested on a single belief, that the helpless are alone, that kindness is weakness, that you can take a person to balance a ledger and no one above you will ever ask why. For 300 years they were right. They were about to find out exactly how wrong a thing can be, and for exactly how long the universe had been keeping count. People always want me to tell this part loud. They want fleets burning. They want the moment I appeared over the Scarn homeworld in wrath and brought it low. They are disappointed when I tell them it was quiet. They think quiet means small. Quiet does not mean small. Ask anyone who has ever heard a debt called in by someone who cannot be argued with, bribed, or fought. Quiet is the most frightening sound there is. Let me tell you how the favor came due. I did not raise a fleet because I did not need one, and because Mara had asked me not to make a war. I had something better than a fleet. I had the law underneath the law, and I had the one thing the Scarn tithe had never once had to deal with in 300 years of taking from the helpless. A creditor they could not refuse. The compacts I carried were not weapons in the way you think of weapons. They were older than that. They were the agreements that made the lanes possible in the first place, the deep protocols that every jump point, every relay, every automated way station in the inhabited dark still answered to, far below the layer where the modern powers had built their ownership. The Scarn believed they owned the roads. What they actually owned was a lease, signed in an age they had never bothered to read about, on infrastructure that still recognized an older authority. Me. I want to be precise about what I did, because the precision is the whole point. I did not seize the lanes. I did not destroy the relays. I simply invoked, across the entire span of Scarn territory, a single old clause, a clause about the misuse of the lanes to traffic in unwilling persons. It had been written so long ago that the beings who wrote it were dust before the Skarn species learned to count. But it had never been repealed, because the powers that could have repealed it were gone, and the keepers who could enforce it had been assumed gone too. The clause was simple: the lanes do not carry the stolen. So I told the lanes to stop carrying them. It began with the work settlements. Every Skarn settlement that held a debtor taken against their will, and there were many, scattered across the rim like sores, found, one quiet cycle, that it could no longer connect to anything. The jump points nearest them went dark to Skarn traffic. The relays stopped acknowledging their codes. The automated systems, recognizing an authority the Skarn had forgotten, outranked their lease, simply and politely declined to serve them. The Combine could not move ships in or out, could not resupply, could not even send orders, because the relays that carried their orders had stopped recognizing them as having the right. To the Skarn, it looked like the universe itself had decided to stop cooperating. They did not understand it. They sent technicians. They sent threats. They sent, eventually, their own enforcers to physically seize the relays, and found that the relays, built in the Elder Age, did not care how many enforcers stood in front of them. The deep protocols do not negotiate with bodies. And here is the restraint Mara asked for, and here is why restraint is so much worse than rage. I harmed no one. Not one being died by my hand or my command. I did not need to. I simply withdrew the privilege of the roads from those who had abused it and let the abuse collapse under its own weight. The Skarn tithe had built everything on the assumption that the lanes were theirs. When the lanes stopped agreeing, the entire Combine, 300 years of accumulated power, began to come apart, not in fire but in silence. Stranded, disconnected. Owed wages they could not pay, holding cargo they could not move, with debtors they could no longer feed and no way to call for help. I did not raise a hand against them. I just stopped letting the universe pretend they were owners. And without the roads, they were nothing, which is exactly what they had always told everyone else they were, every time they took a brother to balance a ledger. The settlement that held Tomas was called Hadril's Hold. I went there myself. It was the one thing I did with my own presence rather than through the old machinery, because some things you do not delegate. I arrived to find it already failing. The lanes had gone dark to it 3 cycles before. The overseers were frightened, then frantic, when an old gray traveler walked through their gates unhindered, through systems that suddenly opened for him and closed for them, very, very quiet. I did not punish the overseers. I want that on the record because people are always surprised by it, and the surprise tells me something about what they would have done. I did not punish them. The old reckoning is exact. The overseers were small functionaries, themselves trapped in the Combine's machine, themselves a kind of debtor. I lifted the dark from the hold only enough to let one ship leave, a transport, which I filled not with the guilty but with the taken. Every person who had been entered into a Skarn ledger against their will and brought to that place to be worked into the ground. All of them. I did not separate the human from the rest. A stolen person is a stolen person, under the clause. The lanes carried them all home. I found Tomas in the lower levels, where they put the new ones. He was thinner than when they had taken him. He had been there long enough to have learned the silence that places like that teach. But he was alive, and when I told him who I was and why I had come, the old man, the warm water, the part Mara gave away, he laughed. A cracked, disbelieving human laugh. "She gave you the part," he said. "She actually, and you came back." He shook his head. "I told her not to be sorry she helped you." "You did," I said. "I heard you, both times you said it. I forget nothing, Tomas Kessler. That is the entire trouble with me. I took him home myself. I would not entrust it to the automated lanes. I flew him back to Pelham Drift in the ship his sister had given a heart, and I will tell you that the whole way, he kept reaching out to touch the bulkheads, as though checking that the dark was really behind him. I wish you could have seen the airlock at Pelham Drift when it opened. Mara was waiting. She had been waiting, I think, the entire time I was gone in the gutted control ring of her dying station, not letting herself hope, because hope is the one thing people in her position cannot afford and cannot stop. When the airlock cycled and her brother stepped through it, alive, thin, home, she did not run to him. She stood very still, the way you do when a thing is too large to move toward all at once. And then he said her name, and the stillness broke, and the two of them held on to each other in the doorway of a half-dead station at a dead crossroads. And for a long moment, the whole turning galaxy and all its compacts and all its debts meant nothing at all next to that. I stood back and let them have it. It was not mine. None of it had ever been about me. I was only the instrument of a debt she had created without knowing, on a cold deck with warm water. When she finally looked at me over her brother's shoulder, her face wet, she did not say thank you. She had told me once that you do not thank a person for the floor everyone stands on. She just looked at me and I understood, and that was enough. But there was more to do. The favor was returned, but a returned favor is not the whole of justice, and the old reckoning was not finished. The Scarn tithe as a combine did not survive. I want to be honest about that, and honest about how it died, because the truth matters more than the comfortable version. It did not die in fire. It died in disconnection. Once the lanes stopped recognizing their right to traffic in the stolen, the combine's whole model collapsed, because their whole model, underneath the polish and the paperwork, had always rested on the threat of taking people. Strip that away, strip away the work settlements and the labor debts and the quiet terror of being entered into a ledger you could never pay off, and the tithe was just a hauling company that had forgotten how to do honest work. The worlds that had paid them for 300 years out of fear stopped paying the moment the fear was gone. The combine fractured. Its territories went their own ways. Its name became a thing people said with contempt rather than dread. I did not kill it. I just took away the lie it was built on, and it could not stand without the lie. Vassain, the collector, I dealt with myself, and I will tell you exactly what I did, because people expect something terrible and are unsettled when they hear it. I found him stranded at a dark relay, his cutter unable to move, his codes refused by the universe, his combine collapsing around him. He did not know me. To him I was an old gray traveler, the kind of being he had collected from 1,000 times, the kind he would once have thrown a ration husk at. I told him who I was. I told him about the warm water and the part and the brother he had entered into a ledger. And then I let him go. That is what I did to Vassain. I let him go. No fleet, no fire, no reckoning beyond the truth laid out plain, that he had spent his whole life balancing accounts and had never once been able to see the one account that actually mattered, the one written in a currency he did not believe in, and that this blindness had just cost his entire combine its existence. I made him understand it, fully. And then I left him there, alive, in the wreckage of everything he had served, to live the rest of his life knowing that it had all come undone because one human woman knelt down for a stranger, and he had decided that decency was an accounting error. There is no fire I could have set that would have burned him worse than that. The old reckoning is exact. It gives each one precisely what they have earned, and what Vassain had earned was to understand. Now the part you actually came for, even if you did not know it, what it all meant, what humanity became. The galaxy noticed. Of course it noticed. A combine that had owned the rim for 300 years does not come apart in silence without everyone asking why. And the answer, when it was pieced together, and I made sure it was pieced together, because a lesson uncollected is a lesson half taught, the answer rearranged how the inhabited dark thought about the small, warm-blooded species from the wet world near the rim. Because here is what the galaxy learned. It learned that humans, given a dying stranger and nothing to gain, will kneel down and offer warm water, that they will give away their last margin and ask for nothing, that they will let themselves be ruined before they will let the universe turn them into the kind of creature that watches a person die to save a payment. That a human, with a collector standing over her and her account empty, will tell the truth, I gave it away, because he was a person and he was dying and I could do something about it, when a lie would have been easier and safer. And the galaxy learned, in the same breath, that there is something in the deep order of things that answers for that. That grace freely given does not vanish unremembered into the dark. That somewhere, someone is keeping count, and that the helpless are not as alone as the powerful have always assumed. The two lessons fused into one, in the way these things do, and it became a kind of law on the rim, unwritten but understood by every species that traded there. Be careful with the humans. Not because they are strong, they are not in the way that frightens combines. Be careful with them because of what their kindness can call down. Because a favor done to a human is a small thing, but a favor done to a human and then betrayed is a debt, and the universe, it turns out, still collects those. They did not fear humanity's fleets. Humanity barely had fleets. They feared humanity's decency and what stands behind it. That is the only kind of fear worth earning. Pelham Drift, in case you wondered, is not a dying station at a dead crossroads anymore. I saw to that in my quiet way. Not with riches. Mara would not have taken riches, and giving them would have missed the entire point. I did it by restoring something. The lanes that had silted up around Pelham Drift, the dead crossroads that had left the Kesslers scraping for every chit, I had the deep protocols open them again, reweighted them. Made the old crossroads a real crossroads once more, so that traffic came and trade came, and the little station that two poor humans kept alive on stubbornness became, over the years, a place that thrived. But that was not the gift. The riches were incidental. The gift was this, and Mara understood it, which is why it was the right gift and the only one I could have given her. I made Pelham Drift a protected place, a way station under the old compacts, recognized by the deep order, where the stranded and the dying and the worthless-looking could come, and where the lanes themselves would remember that here, at least, a being would be offered warm water and asked for nothing. I turned the place where the small favor was given into a place where small favors are given still. Forever, as far as forever goes for things like me. Tomas runs it now mostly. He still sings to the machines badly and feeds the strays and names everyone. Mara grew old there. Humans do not live long by my measure, and her span was a single quiet breath in the length of my memory. But she grew old there well, and warm, and surrounded by the people who came through and never forgot the station that helped them, and she died in her own bed in a place that was safe because she had once been kind in it. I was there at the end. She had asked me to be, in the way you ask a very old friend. She was not afraid. She held my hand, my gray, ancient, ridiculous hand, with her own, which was still a little burned even after all those years because she never did stop working. Was it worth it, she asked me near the end. All of it, what it cost, Tomas, the station, what you had to do. I thought about it honestly because she had earned honesty. You did not do it for what it bought, I said. You did it because it was right, and you would have done it knowing nothing would come of it. That is the only reason it was worth anything at all. She smiled at that, the rare kind, the kind you earned. Yeah, she said. Pick a station with better coffee next time, old man. I have outlived 3 of my own sons. I expect I will outlive a great many more. I will go on being a witness, gray and bent and small, moving through the dark, keeping the count the way my kind has always kept it. But I keep a different count now, too. I keep her name. I told her once that I would remember it, and she laughed, thinking it a sweet thing an old man said that meant nothing. It meant everything. It is, in the end, the only thing I have ever done that mattered, to remember that a small, poor, mortal creature at the edge of nowhere knelt down for a dying stranger and gave away her last margin and asked for nothing, and to make absolutely certain that the turning galaxy never forgot what that kind of thing can call down out of the deep dark when it is betrayed. So if you are ever very far from everything, and very low, and an old gray nothing limps in out of the lanes looking like a husk that wandered too far from where it should have died, be careful what you decide that creature is worth. You never know who is keeping count. And you never know which small favor, given freely on some cold and flickering deck, is the one the whole universe will finally come due to repay.